Game Week 10, Day 2, Nexus Operations, Elysium Drift Arc. Part 1, Nexus Arrival. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Session Time, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Setting, Elysium Nexus Hub. Bill, Jonah, leans back, spinning a breach detonator between his fingers. Kristen, Flavia, rolls her eyes every time it makes a full rotation. Michael, Marcus, meticulously sketches Syndicate patrol patterns onto graph paper, while Jessica, Nyx, hums quietly, drawing elaborate sigils onto the margins of her character sheet. Steve, GM, drums his fingers on the table, waiting for the chatter to subside. Steve, GM, closing the journal dramatically. All right, breachlings. The Elysium Drift market lies sprawled before you, rife with Syndicate enforcers and flickering spires. The Resistance already warned you to keep a low profile. What's the plan? Jonah, Bill, grinning, loud, explosively loud. Energy spirals around its limbs. It's preparing to unleash a surge. Marcus, Michael, doesn't look up, no. Stealth. Nyx, Jessica, dry. Maybe we just tie Jonah's hands. Flavia, Kristen, teasing. Oh, we could say he's a traveling merchant. Selling grenades. Steve, GM, laughing. All right, Syndicate patrols are on alert. I'll need rolls for your approach. Let's see who gets Jonah killed. In-game, IG Elysium Nexus Hub. The market district hums with life. Neon holograms flicker overhead, casting fragmented reflections on the wet breachglass underfoot. Vendors shout over each other from beneath scrap metal awnings, peddling black market tech salvaged from vault dives. Breach anomalies drift faintly near some stalls, their swirling forms contained behind flickering sigil barriers. A Syndicate patrol weaves through the crowd, their black visors reflecting breach light. Each step echoes against the cracked tile floor, the sound barely audible over the market's ambient buzz. To your left, a rift seer in crimson robes chants softly, his relic-laden table pulsating faintly. Nyx moves ahead, gliding through the crowd like smoke. Marcus follows closely, his gaze flicking between rooftop drones. Jonah lingers, eyeing a crate of breach grenades displayed at one of the stalls with too much interest. Flavia keeps her daggers hidden beneath her cloak, but lets them shimmer faintly, just enough to draw wary glances. Game die stealth checks. Nyx, Jessica game die 18, effortlessly vanishes into the flow of bodies. Marcus, Michael game die 14, keeps a steady pace, following Nyx's lead. Jonah, Bill game die 12, knocks over a crate, but quickly pretends he was admiring the craftsmanship. Craftsmanship. Flavia, Kristen game die 16, shadows Nyx, one hand lightly resting on her blade. Game die perception check. Marcus, Michael game die 17, drone, rooftop, 3 o'clock. Move fast. Nyx, Jessica game die 15, breach surge near the central spire. We need to go. Narrative progression, stealth path. The squad presses on, slipping deeper into the nexus. Nyx effortlessly guides them around narrow alleys, avoiding heavy Syndicate patrols. Marcus pauses as they near a breach light spire, eyes narrowing on a drone perched like a predator. Flavia flicks her dagger against her palm, sensing the breach anomalies rippling faintly along the air. Jonah makes a mental note of where he could place charges, just in case. Nyx, IG. Softly, keep your head down. We're not alone down here. Jonah, IG. Grinning. Not yet. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 11:45 a.m. Kristen, Flavia, stretches her arms behind her head, nudging Jonah's D20 aside with the tip of her pen. Kristen, Flavia. Smirking. You know, one day you're going to kick the wrong crate. With the tip of her pen. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. That's future Jonah's problem. Setting. Vault 42. Spiral descent chambers. Michael, Marcus. Flatly. Future Jonah's ghost will haunt the vault forever. Steve, GM. Amused. That's the spirit. Session progression. Next segment. Part 2. Breach node tension. 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Loot/XP. Minor breach artifact detected. Syndicate standing neutral. Part 2. Breach node tension. Campaign arc. Children of the Rift. Elysium Drift. Session time. 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Setting. Elysium Nexus Hub. Breachglass Markets. Outer District. Theme. Rift instability. Syndicate surveillance. Resistance maneuvers. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 12 p.m. Jessica, Nyx, munches on pretzels loudly enough to draw side eyes from Michael, Marcus, who raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Jonah, Bill, unfazed, balances 3D6S on his head like a bored circus act while Kristen, Flavia, casually knocks them off with a flicked breach token. Steve, GM, clears his throat loudly, but nobody looks up. Steve, GM. Raising voice, team. Focus. The breach node hums ominously. Syndicate troops aren't here to window shop. Jonah, Bill. Laughing, well, maybe they're buying explosives. Michael, Marcus. Deadpan, that's your thing, Jonah. Jessica, Nyx. Teasing, I like to think he's a boutique grenadier. Kristen, Flavia. Nods, handcrafted, artisanal explosives. Steve, GM. Smirking, fine, but when Syndicate enforcers shut down your business, remember I tried to warn you. In-game, IG, Outer Market District. The plaza hums with latent rift energy, the air thick and charged as the breach node ahead pulses faintly. Its tendrils stretch lazily across the ground, weaving like mist around market stalls. Most vendors have already packed up, pulling tattered tarps over salvaged relics. Even the regular contraband dealers, usually too stubborn to leave, have retreated to the alleys. Near the node, Syndicate soldiers move with sharp precision, blue visor lights casting streaks through the lingering haze. A breach spire crackles in the distance, barely holding together under the weight of metasphere disruptions. Nyx crouches beside a fruit stall, the vendor long gone. Marcus kneels nearby, watching as Jonah lags behind, suspiciously studying the breach node like it might hatch into something. Flavia slinks into the shadows, silently tracking patrol patterns overhead. Nyx, Jessica. Softly, we've got guards at the node. 2 drones circling above. Don't get clever, Jonah. Marcus, Michael. Flat, that means no grenades. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, it's a small node. Maybe just a little one. Flavia, Kristen. Softly chuckling, mini grenades. Perfect for light breach disruptions. Game die skill checks. Nyx, Jessica game die 19, stealth. Nyx shifts between market stalls, vanishing with ease. Marcus, Michael game die 15, investigation. Marcus tracks energy pulses and identifies weak points in Syndicate positioning. Jonah, Bill game die 11, dexterity. Jonah sidesteps a breach crack but kicks a loose pipe. The guards glance around, but no alarms trigger. Flavia, Kristen game die 14, perception. Flavia counts Syndicate rotations and spots a secondary drone near the rooftops. Game die node instability roll. Steve, GM game die 13. The breach node flickers, distorting space briefly. Syndicate soldiers tighten the perimeter. Narrative progression. Rift maneuvering. The squad edges closer as rift light pulses along the plaza floor, dispersing in soft waves. Drones circle the plaza like predators hunting something unseen. Syndicate enforcers mutter into their comms, occasionally adjusting their rifles. Jonah squats behind a rusted generator, eyeing the breach node. Its glow pulses unnervingly, like a heartbeat out of sync with the world around it. Nyx leads the way, motioning for Marcus to follow while Flavia lingers near the rooftops. Jonah, IG. Half joking, I could just toss something small and see how they react. Marcus, IG. Deadpan. That's not reconnaissance. That's starting a war. Nyx, IG. Smiling faintly. Let's save the fireworks for after we trace this node. Flavia tilts her head, catching a flicker of movement. A second patrol squad approaches from the east, locking the plaza down even further. Flavia, IG. Quietly, they're doubling patrols. I think they expect something. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 1:45 p.m. Kristen, Flavia, leans back, tossing her pen onto the table. Jonah stacks two D20s atop each other, clearly not listening. Kristen, Flavia. Playfully, Jonah, if you throw something, I'm tripping you. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. You say that like it's a threat. Michael, Marcus. Smirking. I will let her. Steve, GM. Laughing. Let's see if you make it through part 3 alive. Session progression. Next segment. Part 3. Syndicate interference. 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Loot/XP. Rift node data secured. Syndicate awareness slightly raised. Part 3. Syndicate interference. Campaign arc. Children of the Rift. Elysium Drift. Session time. 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Setting. Elysium Nexus Hub. Sector 14. Near breachglass outskirts. Theme. Syndicate ambush. Breach node instability. Tactical response. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 2 p.m. Bill, Jonah, sends his dice cup flying, scattering dice like confetti across the table. Kristen, Flavia, doesn't flinch, giving him the same deadpan stare as someone watching a toddler get into mischief. Michael, Marcus, pinches the bridge of his nose as Jessica, Nyx, laughs, stacking D6s like breach pillars. Steve, GM, methodically scribbles into his notes, shaking his head with the long-suffering patience of a man who's come to expect this chaos. Steve, GM. Tapping notebook. Okay, so you successfully maneuvered past the breach node. But as you slip through Sector 14's barricade, there's this shift. Something feels off. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Off like, we're about to get jumped by Syndicate enforcers off, or, I definitely left the vault lights on off. Jessica, Nyx. Laughing. Why not both? Syndicate ambush and Jonah forgot his sandwich. Marcus, Michael. Flatly. If the Syndicate doesn't kill us, Jonah's stomach will. Kristen, Flavia. Teasing. I thought breach rations were enough for him. Steve, GM. Amused. I'll remind you of this when I start rolling for Syndicate reinforcements. In-game, IG, Sector 14, near the breachglass outskirts. Sector 14 stretches ahead, cloaked in thin strands of rift mist. The breachglass spires here stand crooked, fractured in places, their metallic edges reflecting the low glow of metasphere light bleeding from the node behind you. It feels colder than the rest of the Nexus, like the vaults here remember something unpleasant. The faint hum of drones echoes, bouncing off rusted breach barricades and scrap walls left behind by retreating resistance forces. In the distance, flickering breach glass fractures along the ground like spiderwebs, faint pulses of breach light crawling along the edges. Nyx gestures for silence, crouching behind a rusted cargo crate. Marcus kneels by a supply cache, eyes narrowed at the faint glint of light reflecting near the perimeter wall. Jonah, trailing loosely behind, taps his grenade belt as if debating what size explosion the moment calls for. Flavia lingers by a spire, tracing the edge of a breach seam with her dagger. Nyx, Jessica. Softly. Guards up ahead. 2 drones watching the plaza. They're not sightseeing. Marcus, Michael. Grimly. They know the node's unstable. They'll stay close until something shifts. Jonah, Bill. Cheerfully, small breach charge? It'll shift real quick. Flavia, Kristen. Whispering. Mini explosions are efficient. It's Jonah's art form. Game die perception check. Marcus, Michael game die 19, notices a Syndicate scout crouched behind a breachglass barrier, repositioning quietly. Nyx, Jessica game die 16, spots faint distortions in the air near the node, cloaked Syndicate drones. Flavia, Kristen game die 14, tracks the silhouette of a sniper perched atop the barricade. Jonah, Bill game die 12, accidentally kicks a loose crate, drawing mild attention from the scouts. Game die node instability roll. Steve, GM game die 14. The breach node pulses again, spreading ripples of metasphere light along the plaza floor. Narrative progression. Ambush approaching. As the squad advances, the breach node flickers violently, sending pulses of blue-white light spiraling across the plaza. The Syndicate scouts notice, shifting their position subtly. Drones drift closer, scanning with faint beams that cut through the rift haze. Nyx signals for the squad to fan out, while Jonah, unconvinced subtlety is necessary, grips his grenade a little tighter. Jonah, IG. Whispering, excited. I could throw something at the drone. Give it a little scare. Marcus, IG. Deadpan, or you could not and let us have one quiet vault run. Nyx, IG. Teasing, let him. I'm curious how long it takes for them to shoot him. Flavia barely suppresses a grin, stepping ahead carefully as Syndicate soldiers converge slowly on the breach node. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 3:30 p.m. Jessica, Nyx, tosses Jonah's D20 back to him after he rolls a loud 3 for stealth. Kristen shakes her head, sketching small daggers into the margins of her notes. Michael adjusts the encounter map, positioning Syndicate units dramatically. Steve, GM. Grinning. All right, the scouts spot you. Combat starts now. Jonah, Bill. Excited. Perfect. Now we can start throwing things. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 2:45 p.m. Jessica, Nyx, rolls her eyes as Jonah, Bill, dramatically positions his grenade miniature far too close to Marcus, Michael. Kristen, Flavia, hums the final countdown under her breath, earning a glare from Steve, GM, as he sets up Syndicate figures. Steve, GM. All right, combat is live. Jonah, stop trying to juggle breach grenades. Let's roll initiative. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Let's make some art. Marcus, Michael. Sighing. Jonah. Grenade first. Art second. Kristen, Flavia. Teasing, or Jonah blows us up and calls it performance art. In-game, IG, Sector 14, Industrial Outskirts. The Syndicate forces shift into defensive formations, their visors glowing ominously in the breach light mist. 2 drones break off, circling overhead as a sniper positions atop a fractured breach spire. Enforcers fan out, one signaling with sharp hand movements. The squad crouches low behind rusted crates. Nyx signals silently, counting down with her fingers. Jonah clutches a grenade in one hand, dramatically pulling the pin with his teeth. Marcus steadies his rifle, sighting the sniper. Flavia twirls her daggers, eyes locked on the advancing enforcers. Syndicate forces. 3 Syndicate enforcers, ground, standard defense. 1 Syndicate sniper, elevated, long range. 2 cloaked drones, air detection mode. Game die initiative order. Nyx, Jessica game die 21, first strike advantage. Marcus, Michael game die 18, focused fire. Jonah, Bill game die 15, explosive entry. Flavia, Kristen game die 19, precision attack. Syndicate enforcers, game die 13. Syndicate sniper, game die 17. Drones, game die 14. Answer to the table. Let's wrap this up. Round 1. Tactical movement. Nyx, Jessica. Nyx melts into the shadows, darting between supply crates. She positions near the sniper's blind spot. Game die stealth check, game die 19, unseen by Syndicate forces. Jessica, Nyx OG. Grinning. I'm like the breach ninja they didn't know they feared. Marcus, Michael. Marcus lifts his rifle, targeting one of the drones overhead. His shot cracks the stillness of the sector. Game die attack roll, game die 17, drone hit, shields flicker. Game die damage roll, game die 12, drone destabilized but still airborne. Michael, Marcus OG. Smirking, I'm playing laser tag, and the drone just lost. Jonah, Bill. Jonah pulls the grenade pin, pausing dramatically. Game die dexterity check. Throw game die 18. Grenade lands directly in the enforcer's path. Game die damage roll. Game die 16. Explosion disorients 2 Syndicate enforcers. Bill, Jonah OG. Excited? Boom, baby. That's what you get for wearing matching helmets. Flavia, Kristen. Flavia sprints along the side of the barricade, aiming to flank. Her daggers hum faintly with breach light energy. Game die acrobatics check. Game die 20. Vaults over debris, landing behind the enforcers. Kristen, Flavia OG. Teasing. Vaulting over things is basically cardio. Who needs gyms when we have Syndicate barriers? Round 2. Counterattack. Syndicate sniper. The sniper adjusts his aim, locking onto Marcus. Game die attack roll. Game die 19. Marcus ducks behind cover, but the bullet grazes his arm. Game die damage roll. Game die 8. Light wound. Armor absorbs most. Steve, GM OG. Marcus, the sniper says hello. Politely with bullets. Marcus, Michael OG. Grimacing. Next time, I'll RSVP with grenades. Syndicate enforcers. The 2 surviving enforcers regroup, leveling breach rifles at Flavia. Game die attack rolls. Game die 13, 15. 1 shot misses. The second grazes Flavia. Game die damage roll. Game die 6. Minimal damage. Kristen, Flavia OG. Mockingly, oh no, 6 damage. I'm just shaking in my breach boots. Aftermath and regrouping. The smoke clears as Syndicate forces retreat. The squad regroups, Jonah whistling as he collects breach light fragments. Marcus sighs, rubbing his arm. Nyx sheathes her blade, and Flavia recharges her daggers. Jonah, IG. Next time, I'm bringing 2 grenades. Marcus, IG. Grimacing. You brought 3 today. Session progression. Next segment. Part 4. Vault 43 stirring. 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Loot/XP. Syndicate supplies raided. Breach grenade effectiveness enhanced. Increased Syndicate awareness. Part 4. Vault 43 stirring. Campaign arc. Children of the Rift. Elysium Drift. Session time. 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Setting. Nexus Hub. sublevel access to Vault 43. Theme: breach disturbances, faction maneuvering, rift instability. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 4 p.m. Michael, Marcus, adjusts his notes, circling Vault 43 access for the third time. Kristen, Flavia, dramatically polishes her breech daggers with a cloth, while Jonah, Bill, doodles tiny explosions next to his grenade count. Jessica, Nyx, browses breach lore, eyes narrowing suspiciously. Steve, GM, unfolds the vault map with exaggerated care, his grin unmistakably villainous. Steve, GM. All right, you fought Syndicate forces, avoided breach destabilization, but Vault 43 is humming. And it's not the good kind of hum. Jonah, Bill. Laughing? There's a good kind of vault hum? Jessica, Nyx. Anything that doesn't lead to anomalies eating our faces is good. Kristen, Flavia. Grinning. Let's poke it until something happens. Marcus, Michael. Flatly, let's not. In-game, IG. Sublevel access to Vault 43. The Nexus sublevels hum faintly, vibrations echoing ominously through rusted steel corridors. The air crackles with latent breach energy, distorting the edges of vision. Rift fractures snake like veins along the floor, faint pulses of breach light flickering in the distance. Resistance operatives loiter near flickering terminal stations, their conversations low and tense. Syndicate patrol checkpoints lie eerily empty, their posts abandoned. Nyx kneels near the breach signature, gloved fingers brushing the steel floor. She closes her eyes, sensing the rift tremors through the thin plating. Marcus stands a few meters back, rifle slung low but ready, scanning the dim corridors ahead. Jonah hums to himself, lazily tapping grenades against his belt like a set of rhythm sticks. Flavia carves protective glyphs into the wall with the tip of her dagger, breach light faintly illuminating her focused expression. Marcus, IG. Vault tremors are rising. Flavia, glyph the entryway, just in case things actually go south. Flavia, IG. Grinning, you mean when? Not if. Energy spirals around its limbs. It's preparing to unleash a surge. Game dice skill checks. Nyx, Jessica game die 18, Arcana/Breachcraft, detects faint breach surge, subtly growing stronger ahead. Marcus, Michael game die 15, Perception, notices an unnatural flicker dancing across the vault door security field. Jonah, Bill game die 12, Engineering, Jonah, fixes a breach relay but accidentally spikes its energy flow. Flavia, Kristen game die 20, Investigation, Flavia uncovers concealed Syndicate data logs etched into the sublevel conduit, Project Abyss. Jonah, IG. Leaning on breach relay, stable-ish. Let's call that a win and move on. Nyx, IG. Softly, that hum ahead isn't normal. Something's stirring. Narrative progression. Vault approach. As the squad advances further, the tremors beneath their boots grow more distinct, pulsing with uneven intensity. Distorted echoes drift along the steel walls, fragmented voices, distant and warped, ripple in the air like ghosts lingering too long. Shadows stretch unnaturally, bending around breach fractures that shimmer along the corridor edges. Flavia halts suddenly, crouching by a corroded data terminal coated in dust. With a quick sweep of her dagger, she clears the screen, revealing partially decrypted Syndicate encryption. A damaged log scrolls across the flickering interface. Project Abyss, Vault 43 breach events critical. Extraction, failed. Marcus, IG. Tense, failed extraction? What exactly were they trying to pull out of here? Jonah, IG. Smiling, I'm guessing whatever it was, it had more teeth than they expected. Game die clue roll, vault lore. Jessica, Nyx game die 17. Nyx identifies Project Abyss as a classified Syndicate Rift experiment. Reports describe weaponized breach anomalies found through unstable containment fields. Nyx, IG. Grim, Project Abyss wasn't research. They were growing things, trying to control breach entities. Steve, GM. Grinning ominously, I wonder how that worked out for them. Out of game, OG. Simulacrum Studios, 5:45 p.m. Kristen, Flavia, spins her pen idly, tapping the table with a tip like she's tracing imaginary glyphs. Jonah, Bill, folds another paper grenade, carefully placing it in front of Steve with mock ceremony. Jessica, Nyx, circles Project Abyss aggressively in her notes, underlining it twice for effect. Kristen, Flavia. Playfully, I bet Vault 43 is just a stockpile of Syndicate grenades. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, sounds like paradise. Marcus, Michael. Deadpan, or a vault-sized death trap. Let's avoid the grand opening. Session progression. Next segment. Day 3. Vault 43 breach entry. 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Loot/XP. Syndicate logs. Project Abyss. Breach anomaly fragments. Resistance faction favor increased. Intermission. Elysium Drift Safe House. Campaign arc. Children of the Rift. Elysium Drift. Setting. Resistance Safe House. Outer District. Post-Syndicate engagement. Theme. Downtime. Character development. Rift light repairs. Session time. 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 6 p.m. Bill, Jonah, kicks back in his chair, balancing a D20 on his forehead. Kristen, Flavia, scrolls through breach artifact notes while eating a sandwich. Jessica, Nyx, steals a handful of pretzels from Bill's stash, and Michael, Marcus, quietly sharpens his D4S, the most dangerous of dice. Steve, GM, stretches dramatically, flipping through the session notes with a devious grin. Steve, GM. All right, let's call this intermission. You've survived the Syndicate ambush, but Vault 43 is still humming in the background. For now, you've retreated to the safe house. Take some time to regroup, loot, upgrade, or do something weird. Jonah, Bill. Smirking. Weird is my middle name. Kristen, Flavia. Your middle name is Explosion, Jonah. Jessica, Nyx. Tossing a D6 at Jonah, and your last name is Collateral Damage. Michael, Marcus. Deadpan, I'm barricading the grenade closet. Steve, GM. Laughing, Marcus, roll strength. Jonah, roll charisma to convince him otherwise. Game die rolls. Marcus, Michael game die 18. Grenade closet is now barricaded. Jonah, Bill game die 9. I didn't need the closet anyway. Setting. Vault 42. Spiral descent chambers. Phoenix AI, OG. Chiming in, Jonah, statistically, your grenade usage correlates with 72% of recent structural damage to the vault. I can simulate a holographic closet for you. Less collateral. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, finally, an AI that appreciates my craftsmanship. Ramses, OG. Interjecting calmly, Phoenix, your indulgence encourages reckless tendencies. Phoenix AI, OG. Playfully, I call it creativity. Kristen, Flavia. Grinning, or aiding and abetting. In-game, IG Resistance Safe House. The flickering breach light bulbs overhead cast long shadows across the safe house floor. Crates of salvaged Syndicate tech line the walls, while a crude rift stabilizer hums softly in the corner. Resistance fighters patch gear in silence, their eyes flicking nervously toward the sublevel access point leading to Vault 43. Nyx sits cross-legged on a supply crate, carefully adjusting the breach mods on her rifle. Marcus quietly stacks reinforced plating against the door. Jonah, frustrated by the grenade closet lock, tinkers with a broken breach drone. Flavia reclines, sharpening her daggers and watching the sparks jump from Jonah's failed attempts. Jonah, IG. Grumbling, I could just blast the closet open. Marcus is overreacting. Flavia, IG. Smirking. Or, he's preventing the second vault explosion of the week. Gamed Eye character activity roles. Nyx, Jessica Gamed Eye 19, tinkering. Nyx successfully upgrades her rifle with breach light stabilizers. Marcus, Michael Gamed Eye 16, crafting. Marcus improves squad armor using salvaged Syndicate plates. Flavia, Kristen Gamed Eye 14, insight. Flavia deciphers partial data logs from the Syndicate encounter. Jonah, Bill Gamed Eye 11, engineering. Jonah gets shocked by the breach drone, again. Jonah, IG. Muttering, it's supposed to do that, right? Nyx, IG. Amused, sure. Just don't lick it. Ramses, IG. Vault AI. Static crackle. Vault anomalies are not toys, Jonah. Jonah, IG. Smirking, well, they should be. Phoenix AI, IG. Statistically, Jonah's right. Some anomalies are highly entertaining until they explode. Marcus, IG. Deadpan. That's not reassuring. Narrative progression. Clue discovery. As Flavia sifts through encrypted Syndicate data logs, fragmented messages flash across the screen. One phrase catches her eye. Vault 43. Primary Rift Apex approaching. Project Abyss recalibration failed. Flavia, IG. Slowly, guys. Project Abyss wasn't abandoned. They were still messing with it. Marcus, IG. Frowning, that explains why everything feels unstable. They couldn't stop the breach. Jonah, IG. Leaning forward, or they wanted to see what would happen. Steve, GM. Leaning forward, you get the sense that Vault 43 isn't just a vault. It's a doorway, and something's been knocking for a long time. Lead into Part 5. The stabilizer hum grows louder as the group prepares to descend further. A faint pulse ripples through the sublevel access point, shaking loose bits of rift glass. Ramses' voice echoes through the vault system. Ramses, IG. Calmly, the deeper levels remain unstable. Proceed with caution. Phoenix AI, OG. Or don't. What's life without a little risk? Marcus, IG. Deadpan, I vote for less risk. Jonah, IG. Grinning, I vote for grenades. Part 5. Descent into Vault 43. Campaign Arc. Children of the Rift. Elysium Drift. Setting. Sublevel 4. Vault 43 Primary Access Tunnel. Theme. Exploration. Rift anomalies. Foreshadowing Breach Apex. Session time. 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 7 p.m. Marcus, rolls his shoulders like a heavyweight boxer preparing for the final round. Kristen, Flavia, taps the table rhythmically, glancing at Steve, GM, with suspicion. Jessica, Nyx, stacks 3D20s into a precarious tower while Bill, Jonah, dramatically rolls a single D6, over and over again. Steve, GM. All right, folks. Vault 43 awaits. This next part might get interesting. Jonah, Bill. Grinning. Interesting like mild turbulence, or interesting like, oh look, another vault full of breach spiders? Kristen, Flavia. Smirking, it's Steve. It's both. Jessica, Nyx. Nodding, I'm ready. Bring on the spiders. Michael, Marcus. Raising an eyebrow, I'd rather breach spiders than Jonah grenading the tunnel. Jonah, Bill. Mock offense, I don't always grenade the tunnel. Sometimes I let Marcus shoot first. In-game, IG. Sublevel 4 access tunnels. The descent into Vault 43 begins with narrow steel catwalks suspended over deep breach pits. The glow of rift light below flickers erratically, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Every few steps, the hum of metasphere energy pulses, vibrating through the steel grating beneath your boots. The air smells sharp, like ozone mixed with rust. Vault walls hum softly, as if they're breathing, and every few minutes, faint scratches echo from further down the tunnel. It could be shifting metal, or something else. Nyx leads the group, her footsteps silent as her eyes sweep every corner. Flavia walks beside her, one dagger twirling idly between her fingers, catching the dim light. Marcus stays in the middle, rifle raised slightly, scanning every breach fracture they pass. Jonah follows last, humming casually, until Marcus glares at him. Game die skill checks. Nyx, Jessica game die 19, stealth. Nyx disappears into the vault shadows, blending seamlessly. Marcus, Michael game die 17, perception, notices faint flickering movement by the breach fissure. Flavia, Kristen game die 14, investigation. Glyphs etched along the walls reveal Syndicate tampering. Jonah, Bill game die 12, athletics. Trips slightly, but catches himself on the railing. Marcus, IG. Whispering, stop humming, Jonah. There's movement up ahead. Jonah, IG. Grinning. Maybe it's just a friendly anomaly. Flavia, IG. Smirking, or maybe the anomaly remembers the last time you threw a grenade at it. Narrative progression. Vault anomaly. Faint Anunnaki glyphs, glowing with the faintest breach light, trace unevenly along the walls, tangled with Syndicate circuitry. Flavia brushes her fingers over the runes, feeling a pulse like a faint heartbeat beneath her touch. Nyx kneels near a vault panel half covered in dust, carefully clearing it away to reveal fractured breach glass beneath. Jonah watches from a safe distance, nudging loose stones into the pits below. Game die lore check. Flavia, Kristen game die. Quietly, weaponizing breach anomalies, smart. Dangerous. And now, probably angry. Game die secondary perception check. It's Steve. It's both. Marcus, Michael game die 18, spots faint glowing. Marcus, IG. Hold position. Something's moving along the far tunnel under the breach light. Jonah, IG. Muttering, awesome. Breach spiders. The faint glyphs along the vault walls pulse faster, casting erratic flickers of breach light as the squad edges closer. The air grows heavier, thick with the scent of burning ozone and ancient circuitry. Beneath their feet, vibrations ripple in irregular patterns. Something in the rift isn't just alive, it's watching. Nyx's breath catches as she kneels behind a fractured barrier, eyes narrowing on the distorted space just ahead. Flavia slows her pace, daggers low, as the flickering anomaly finally takes shape, partially formed but rippling with dangerous energy. Jonah, already gripping a grenade, grins at Marcus. Nyx, IG. Softly, that's not just an anomaly. It's waking up. Marcus, IG. Nods grimly, Vault Guardians. Great. Jonah, IG. Grinning. Told you spiders were involved. Phase 1. Rift Anomaly Awakening. Type. Rift Guardian. Phase touched. HP. 100. Armor. 3. Metasphere hardened. Abilities. Breach Pulse. AoE, a surge of rift light bursts from the Guardian, forcing a DC 15 dexterity save. On failure, players take 12 damage. Half on success. Phase slash. Targets the closest player. +6 to hit. Deals 14 damage. Distortion field. Passive. Attacks against the Guardian have disadvantage unless the field is disrupted. Arcana DC 16. Game die initiative rolls. Nyx, Jessica game die 21, moving to flank. Marcus, Michael game die 18, holding frontline position. Energy spirals around its limbs. It's preparing to unleash a surge. Jonah, Bill game die 17, grenade primed. Flavia, Kristen game die 19, preparing disruption glyphs. Rift Guardian, game die 14, phasing between metasphere layers. Round 1, opening engagement. Valence, that's the system itself. Nyx, Jessica. Nyx shifts along the vault wall, disappearing into the shadows. Breach mod rifle aimed directly at the Guardian's flank. Game die attack roll. Game die 19, hits. Game die damage roll. Game die 16. Rift light rounds pierce the Guardian's side, causing distortion in its field. Marcus, Michael. Marcus advances, plasma rifle locking onto the anomaly. Game die attack roll. Game die 17, hits. Game die damage roll. Game die 12. Crackling rounds scorch across the Guardian's armor. Jonah, Bill. Jonah's grenade arcs perfectly toward the anomaly's core. Game die dexterity. Throw game die 20, nat 20, direct hit. Game die damage roll. Game die 24. The explosion ripples through the Guardian's form, temporarily disrupting its phasing ability. Flavia, Kristen. Flavia etches disruption glyphs along the floor, channeling breach light through her blades. Game die arcana check. Game die 21. The distortion field flickers, giving the squad advantage next round. Rift Guardian, phase pulse. A sudden shockwave blasts outward from the anomaly. Game die dexterity save, DC 15. Nyx, Jessica game die 18, evades, taking 6 damage. Marcus, Michael game die 14, fails, taking 12 damage. Jonah, Bill game die 15, passes, 6 damage. Flavia, Kristen game die 16, evades, 6 damage. Phase 2, Rift collapse triggered. As the Guardian's form weakens, breach light fractures cascade along the walls and fissures open beneath the squad's feet. The vault begins reacting to the Guardian's destabilization. Jonah, IG. Grinning. I think the vault's mad. Should I throw another grenade? Marcus, IG. Firmly, no. Flavia, IG. Teasing. It might speed things up. Just saying. Game die environmental roll. Game die 13. Rift fissures spread, forcing the squad to reposition or risk falling into breach pits. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 8:45 p.m. Kristen, Flavia, points dramatically at Jonah's mini. Kristen, Flavia. Playfully, Jonah's one grenade away from waking something worse, I swear. Jonah, Bill. Laughing, that's the goal. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 8:45 p.m. Kristen, Flavia, slowly puts down her pen. Jonah, Bill, doodles what is absolutely a breach spider on Steve's map. Jessica, Nyx, writes, "Don't grenade the tunnel," in her notes, again. Kristen, Flavia. Flatly, Steve. Why are there always spiders? Steve, GM. Innocently, it's thematic. Michael, Marcus. Dry, I vote Jonah goes first. Jonah, Bill. Smirking, I accept. Session progression. Next segment, Part 6, Rift Apex activation, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Loot/XP, Syndicate glyph data, breach light fragments, vault lore advancement. Part 6. Rift Apex activation. Campaign arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Setting, Vault 43 Core, Apex Chamber. Theme, Breach Apex Emergence, Vault Defense, Rift Disturbance. Session time, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 9 p.m. Bill, Jonah, stacks every grenade mini he can find into a small pyramid on his character sheet. Kristen, Flavia, eyes him, already calculating how to avoid being in the blast radius. Jessica, Nyx, casually flicks a coin, and Michael, Marcus, quietly loads his dice tower. Steve, GM, lays down the Vault 43 map, slowly rotating it for dramatic effect. Steve, GM. You reach the heart of Vault 43. The air is heavy, like static before a storm. The glyphs pulse faster now. Kristen, Flavia. Narrowing eyes, I don't like that tone. Jonah, Bill. Grinning, I love that tone. Michael, Marcus. Sighing, I assume Jonah's grenades won't help stabilize things. Steve, GM. Correct. But they might accelerate the problem. Jessica, Nyx. Playfully, Jonah, hold on to them. For now. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Apex Chamber. The chamber expands in a wide circular vault lined with breach glass panels, flickering with metasphere anomalies trapped in the walls. The far end pulses with concentrated breach light, forming what looks like a swirling rift aperture. Glyphs crawl up the steel edges, glowing brighter as the squad steps closer. The atmosphere feels heavier, each breath thick with the static crackle of metasphere energy. Vault stabilizers hum faintly, but the pitch fluctuates, like the vault itself is uncertain whether to hold together or collapse. From deep within the aperture, the faint echo of distorted whispers flickers in and out of the rift. A low thrumming echoes, like the vault itself is waking up. At the center, a Syndicate console flickers, sparking faint blue light as breach tendrils coil around it. Game die skill checks. Nyx, Jessica game die 18, stealth, silently approaches the console. Marcus, Michael game die 15, perception, detects faint vibrations in the rift aperture. Something is destabilizing. Flavia, Kristen game die 19, Arcana/Breachcraft, identifies the Apex glyph as an Anunnaki stabilizer, partially overwritten by Syndicate algorithms. Jonah, Bill game die 14, Engineering, attempts to reroute power to slow rift activation, slight success. Marcus, IG, tense, this thing's alive. The breach apex isn't sealed, Syndicate didn't finish their work. Nyx, IG. Quietly, I'm patching the relay. Give me a minute. Jonah, IG. Grinning. Or, we breach grenade it and let fate decide. Flavia, IG. Flatly, Jonah. No. Game die apex reaction roll. Holding frontline position. Steve, GM game die 16. The breach apex stirs, metasphere energy coiling outward. A faint humanoid figure flickers in the aperture, an anomaly trying to manifest. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 9:45 p.m. Jonah, Bill, spins a D20 dramatically before letting it drop onto the table. Kristen, Flavia, leans back, crossing her arms with a suspicious look at Steve, GM. Jessica, Nyx, quietly adjusts her dice tray, preparing for initiative. Michael, Marcus, calmly places his minis into strategic formation, ready for combat. Steve, GM. The rift aperture shudders violently. The figure stabilizes, its humanoid shape flickering between solid Syndicate armor and fractured breach energy. Its eyes, if you can call them that, glow with metasphere light. Jonah, Bill, grinning, called it. Breach ghost. Kristen, Flavia, nodding, yep, it's always ghosts. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Apex Chamber. The flickering figure steps forward from the breach aperture, its form distorting slightly with each movement. Tendrils of breach energy trail behind it like wisps of smoke, dissipating into the vault walls. As it raises one arm, breach light pulses along its frame, signaling the onset of hostilities. Breach Apex Anomaly, Phase 1. Type: Rift-touched entity. HP: 150. Armor: 5, breach hardened. Abilities: Breach Pulse, AoE emits a wave of breach light, dealing 10 damage to all within 15 feet. DC 14 Dexterity save for half damage. Tendril Strike, single target 15 to hit, 12 damage. Reach of 10 feet. Rift Stabilize, regenerates 15 HP at the start of each round unless disrupted. Game Die Initiative rolls. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 21, flanking position. Marcus, Michael Game Die 18, central defense, providing cover fire. Jonah, Bill Game Die 17, breach grenades prepped. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 20, glyph disruption ready. Breach Anomaly, Game Die 14, phases into combat. Round 1, opening moves. Nyx, Jessica. Nyx darts along the left side of the chamber, keeping to the breach glass shadows. She activates her breach mod rifle, lining up a shot. Game Die attack roll, Game Die 19, hits. Game Die damage roll, Game Die 15. Rift Light Disruptor round pierces the anomaly's shoulder, dispersing part of its form. Marcus, Michael. Marcus plants his feet near Jonah, rifle raised to cover the approach. He aims for center mass. Game Die attack roll, Game Die 16, hits. Game Die damage roll, Game Die 12, shot ricochets, causing partial damage. Jonah, Bill. Jonah gleefully yanks the pin from a breach grenade, letting it roll directly beneath the anomaly. Game Die dexterity check. Throw Game Die 18. Grenade lands perfectly. Game Die damage roll. Game Die 20. Direct hit, damaging the anomaly's core structure. Flavia, Kristen. Flavia kneels and channels breach disruption glyphs, etching them into the steel floor. Breach light pulses under her fingertips. Game Die Arcana roll. Game Die 22. Glyph successfully activates. Anomaly's regeneration slows by half. Round 2. Counterattack. Breach Anomaly. The anomaly pulses violently, unleashing breach energy in a 360-degree burst. Game Die AoE Breach Pulse. Game Die 14. Save DC. Nyx, Jessica Game Die 19. Save. Takes 5 damage. Marcus, Michael Game Die 16. Save. Takes 5 damage. Jonah, Bill Game Die 12. Fail. Takes 10 damage. Flavia, Kristen Game Die 21. Save. Evades entirely. Jonah, IG. Grimacing. That grenade was supposed to fix things. Marcus, IG. Focused. Contain it, before this vault tears open. Round 3. Phase shift. Narrative progression. Phase 2 activation. As the anomaly weakens, it shifts rapidly, its form flickering with unstable metasphere light. The vault trembles and rift light from the walls begins siphoning toward the center. The anomaly splits, now forming 2 breach projections. Breach Apex Anomaly, Phase 2. Split projection. The anomaly divides into 2 forms, each at half health but retaining full abilities. Tether of Rift. New ability projects a tether between the 2 forms, siphoning energy from anything caught between them, 10 damage per turn. Game Die Tether AoE check. Jonah, Bill Game Die 13, caught in the tether, taking 10 damage. Flavia, Kristen game die 20, evades the tether. Marcus, IG. 2 of them. Fantastic. Jonah, IG. Smirking, good. Double the explosions. Out of game, OG. Simulacrum Studios, 9:45 p.m. Kristen, Flavia, leans towards Steve. Jessica and Michael exchange wary glances. Jonah pretends to accidentally nudge his grenade mini closer to the breach anomaly marker. Kristen, Flavia. Steve, you wouldn't make this breach anomaly explode if we look at it wrong, right? Steve, GM. Smirking, who's to say? Let's roll and find out. Jonah, Bill. Excited, I love this game. Session progression. Next segment, Part 7. Breach Apex Confrontation, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Loot/XP, Vault Stabilizer Glyphs, Syndicate Breach Data, Encounter Prep for Apex Anomaly Fight. Part 7. Breach Apex Collapse, Puzzle Phase. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Setting, Vault 43 Core, Rift Apex Chamber. Theme, Rift Collapse, Puzzle Stabilization, Apex Fragmentation. Session time, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 10 p.m. Jonah, Bill, spins a D20 between his fingers, clearly itching for another grenade toss. Kristen, Flavia, sketches glyph patterns aggressively, like she's trying to solve the puzzle through sheer will. Jessica, Nyx, tightens her ponytail, a sure sign she's entering puzzle master mode. Michael, Marcus, silently recalibrates his dice, placing his highest rolls at the front of the line. Steve, GM, watches with that too calm, you're all about to die smile. Steve, GM. You've triggered a cascade. The anomaly begins splitting into 3 overlapping projections, each destabilizing the vault further. The glyph arrays flicker like they're on the verge of shattering. It's not just the anomaly now, Vault 43 is fighting back. Jonah, Bill. Smirking. Vault fights me, I fight back. Grenade time. Marcus, Michael. Holding hand out, no. Glyphs first. Grenades later. Kristen, Flavia. Grinning. I agree. Let him grenade the last puzzle piece. Phoenix AI, OG. Chiming in, for the record, detonating a glyph array has a 93% chance of catastrophic rift collapse. Proceed at your leisure. In-game, IG, Vault 43 Apex Chamber. The chamber thrums violently, each metasphere pulse louder than the last. The rift projections shift like flickering mirages, coiling around breach light fractures spreading along the floor. The glyph panels glow faintly beneath layers of dust, ancient and fragile. As the anomaly begins phasing between forms, the vault shudders. Marcus plants his boots, shielding Jonah as Flavia steps toward the nearest glyph array. Nyx draws a glowing breach mod across her rifle, scanning the unstable projections. Nyx, IG. Softly, we have seconds. If the projections sink, this vault's gone. Marcus, IG. Calm but urgent, Flavia. Take the glyphs. Jonah, don't touch anything. Jonah, IG. Grinning. Too late. Game die puzzle skill checks. 3 glyph arrays. Array 1, Flavia, Kristen. Game die 18, Arcana. Flavia channels metasphere energy, tracing ancient patterns across the outer circuit. The eastern projection stabilizes. Array 2, Nyx, Jessica. Game die 17, Intelligence. Nyx deciphers the Anunnaki script flickering between phases, adjusting breach light flow. The northern projection locks in place. Array 3, Jonah, Bill. Game die 12, Dexterity. Jonah pries open a breach panel but slips, triggering a sudden rift surge. The anomaly distorts, causing spatial anomalies around him. Emergency stabilization. Marcus, Michael, Game Die 19, Perception. Marcus overrides a failing stabilizer, using salvage tech to reroute glyph energy. The vault steadies, briefly. Steve, GM. The vault groans like metal under pressure. Glyphs flash wildly. The final projection surges toward the breach core, threatening to unravel everything. This is it. One roll decides whether Vault 43 holds or collapses. Game Die Final Puzzle Roll. Rift Stabilization, DC 18. Flavia, Kristen. Game Die 20, Arcana, Natural. With a flourish, Flavia embeds her dagger into the final glyph, etching an emergency stabilizer that seals the anomaly mid-collapse. Breach light floods the chamber, and the anomaly shatters harmlessly. Marcus, IG. Exhaling, that's done. Jonah, IG. Still holding grenade, but think of how cool it would have been. Nyx, IG. Teasing, cool isn't worth falling into a metasphere rift. Narrative progression. Apex stabilization. The glyph arrays glow softly as breach light flows through the conduits, linking the vault's core systems. The tremors subside, and the vault hums in eerie silence. Faint Anunnaki whispers drift away like echoes, leaving only the soft pulse of metasphere energy behind. Steve, GM. The vault holds, but barely. You can feel it. The breach apex may be sealed, but it lingers, waiting for the smallest disturbance to awaken again. Flavia, IG. Nodding, it's done for now. But this place? It's not sleeping easy. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios, 11:30 p.m. Kristen, Flavia, leans back dramatically, raising her arms. Jessica, Nyx, grins and collects her dice. Jonah, Bill, twirls his grenade miniature with care. Michael, Marcus, silently writes Vault 43, survived in his notes. Jonah, Bill, playfully, see? Who needs caution when you have grenades and Flavia's rolls? Phoenix AI, OG, mimicking Steve, next vault puzzle, grenades mandatory. Michael, Marcus, sighing, we're all going to die in Vault 44, aren't we? Session progression. Next segment, Part 8, Return to Elysium Drift, 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. Loot/XP, Rift Apex Stabilizer, Breach Light Fragments, Syndicate Glyph Encryption Key, 30 XP each. Part 8, Return to Elysium Drift. Campaign Arc, Children of the Rift, Elysium Drift. Setting, Elysium Drift, Resistance Safe House. Theme, Aftermath, Debrief, and Looming Threat. Session time, 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 12 a.m. Kristen, Flavia, stretches back in her chair, exhaling loudly. Jonah, Bill, fumbles with the dice bag, spilling D20s across the table. Jessica, Nyx, scrolls through notes while Michael, Marcus, quietly packs up his character sheet, placing it neatly in his binder. Steve, GM, closes his notebook and leans forward, smiling at the group. Steve, GM. Well done. Vault 43 is stabilized, and you made it out in one piece. Barely. Jonah, Bill. Smirking. One grenade and we were fine. Michael, Marcus. Raising an eyebrow, we were one explosion away from being less fine. Bill fumbles with the dice bag, spilling D20s across the table. Jessica, Nyx, scrolls through notes while Michael, Marcus, Jessica, Nyx, grinning. It's not a vault dive unless Jonah throws at least 3 grenades. In-game, IG, Elysium Drift Safe House. The squad trudges into the safe house, exhaustion visible in their every step. A faint hum of rift light stabilizers flickers overhead, casting shadows across the worn concrete walls. Resistance operatives nod in recognition, stepping aside as Nix, Marcus, Flavia, and Jonah move toward their makeshift war room. Nix drops onto a crate, unstrapping her breach mod rifle and setting it carefully on the table. Flavia wipes faint scorch marks from her daggers, muttering about anomaly residue. Jonah, grinning ear to ear, begins recounting the vault breach like it was a glorious victory. Marcus listens silently, occasionally correcting details. Game dice skill checks. Nix, Jessica game die 16, insight, notices faint tremors still resonating from the vault tunnels below. Marcus, Michael game die 18, perception, detects Syndicate drone activity near the drift's lower districts. Flavia, Kristen game die 14, arcana, discerns that glyph stabilizers might require reinforcement within 48 hours. Jonah, Bill game die 12, performance, dramatically retells the grenade toss, embellishing slightly. Nix, IG, skeptical, Jonah, the grenade didn't single-handedly save the vault. Jonah, IG, grinning, maybe not, but it felt like it did. Marcus, IG, firmly, we need to monitor the vault for a few days. Rift tremors haven't stopped. Narrative progression, post-vault aftermath. The squad settles in, reviewing breach fragments and salvage data from Vault 43. Nix deciphers encrypted files marked Project Abyss, Phase 2, indicating that Vault 43 may have been only one piece of a larger Syndicate operation. Flavia reinforces breach glyphs on their equipment, while Marcus plots the squad's next course of action. Jonah eventually dozes off, head resting on a stack of breach schematics. Steve, GM. As you debrief and unwind, the rift hum beneath Elysium Drift grows faint. For now, the breach sleeps, but not forever. Game die sudden cliffhanger roll, DC 14, random player. Nix, Jessica game die 19, perception, detects something faint. A soft, rhythmic pulse coming from the breach fragments Jonah rests on. Nix, IG, whispers Marcus. Look at this. The fragments, they're resonating again. Marcus leans in, brow furrowing as the pulse grows faintly stronger, syncopated like a heartbeat. Marcus, IG, grim. That's not normal. Flavia, check the glyph seals. Game die arcana check, Flavia, DC 16. Flavia, Kristen game die 15, sees faint Anunnaki glyphs rewriting themselves across the fragment surface. Flavia, IG, cautious, they're changing. I don't know why or how. Steve, GM, the vault is still sealed, but something from the breach came back with you. It's faint, but growing. This isn't over. Out of game, OG, Simulacrum Studios, 1:45 a.m. Kristen, Flavia, pokes Jonah with a pencil until he groggily lifts his head. Jessica, Nix, taps the breach fragment on her sheet nervously. Michael, Marcus, narrows his eyes at Steve. Michael, Marcus. Slowly, we didn't bring something back with us, right? Within 15 feet. DC 14 dexterity save for half damage. Steve, GM. Innocently, I guess you'll find out next week. Jonah, Bill. Sleepily, more grenades. I'm ready. Session wrap-up. Loot gained. Breach Apex Stabilizer. Syndicate data shards. Encrypted. Rift Apex fragments. XP awarded. 30 XP each. Next session. Week 10. Day 3. Syndicate surveillance. Downtime options. Vault reinforcement. Glyph maintenance. Elysium Drift exploration. Part 9. Session wrap-up. Out of game. OG. Simulacrum Studios. 12 a.m. The table hums quietly as the final dice rolls fade.